Rebecca Arora, thank you for joining me on What's Possible.
I'm so happy to be here, Eileen. Thank you for having me not once, but twice. It
Yes,
was such
yes,
a
yes.
privilege.
And for our listeners that haven't heard our first episode, head on in the Wayback Time Machine and pull that up with Rebecca. We had a fun time ages ago. And then, of course, Rebecca has written a book. So we had to bring her back on, besides the fact she's a good friend of mine and a good friend of Silicon Valley Change Executive Coaching. I had the privilege of coming across Rebecca. I'm going to say a zillion years ago. It was probably less than a zillion years ago, but it was quite some time ago when we both lived in the Bay Area and our paths crossed, we connected, and then literally decades passed. And then I had the privilege of reconnecting with Rebecca, which has been a huge, huge treat. So, Rebecca, I am going to, before we dive on in, I'm going to ask you a question that I've been asking quite regularly. If I were to plug into chat and ask them about Rebecca Arora, what would they share about you and possibly some fun facts that we wouldn't get off of your LinkedIn profile?
It's such a good question, Eileen, because we used to Google ourselves. And so this nudge, I chat GPT, Clauded, Gemini'd myself. um, aside from being an executive coach, so I coach CEOs and their executive teams. What I found out in actually doing this exercise is that Rebecca comes across as a rare blend of sharp strategic mind and deeply embodied human presence. So on the one hand, she's intellectually rigorous, but she also notices physicality. So that's posture, pace, flexibility, and nervous system signals. So essentially, she's a translator, um, translating some of these physical things into insights leaders can use. So, in that sense, she's a bridge between high stakes business and somatic wisdom. But there's another thing, then this really shocked me. It says creatively, she's thoughtful and intentional. She cares about design, language, and structure. And I was like, huh, okay. With a global sensibility shaped by her life between cultures. And I think what it picked up there is I grew up in Singapore, and I have family in India, and I spend chunks of time in Japan.
Wow.
Um, so hooray for for knowing some things about me.
Awesome. So now, if we were to zoom out and say, okay, leave the AI behind, in your own words, share who are you
Mm.
at the core?
Well, at the core, I'm someone who cares deeply. I'm probably always been hypersensitive. And that was often a something I had to overcome, like try to get thick skin. Um, but luckily in coaching, it becomes one of my greatest assets because I
Yeah.
can sense things and sense what's being said, what's not being said. And then fast forward with a history in training and body work, I can read postures. So sort of this sensitive soul who knows what it's like to have to live in a tough and tricky world. So,
Yeah, I love that. And, if I were to add on to that, which piggybacks exactly with what you're saying, is you're incredibly intuitive as well. And I love how you see that as your superpower. I recently had Claude Silver on, and she often talks about being sensitive and a highly perceptive person. And it is something that we can find our leaders hiding for so long and trying to show up differently in a world that doesn't always celebrate that. And then all of a sudden you come to this place in life and it's like, wait a second, I'm pulling that out and I'm going to lead with that because that is my superpower. And so I love that you lean into it and see it as your strength.
oh, thanks for naming that. Yeah.
So
Thanks.
for our listeners, Rebecca wrote the book Somatic Intelligence. And pardon for now we're on YouTube. So pardon all these yellow stickies where I've identified all the stuff I love about this book. And so we are going to be talking about somatic intelligence. I'm going to ask you the most basic question to start with. What on earth are you talking about when you say somatic intelligence? We know about EQ, we know about IQ. What are we talking about here?
Yeah, what the heck? Basically, if we think of IQ as our ability to think, to plan, to problem solve, to look at data, to analyze IQ. Much of what happens at work, we're using IQ. EQ, it's gained a lot of traction over the years, thank heavens, because it's essential too in leadership. I classify EQ. Yes, it's feeling, it is your emotions, but I almost think of it as the domain of the heart. Like if we're thinking IQ in the head, and if anyone's seeing us on YouTube, it's like up here, uh, EQ somewhere down here. It doesn't live just there, but what is your heart saying? It's your ability to connect to yourself and to each other. That's what's happening with EQ and our emotions. Somatic intelligence is the intelligence of the body. And this to me was the most under leveraged resource. And it's so important because the body's intelligence is all about presence. It's your
Yeah.
capacity to be with things. So it's linked not only to, things like executive presence, creativity, connection, it also, and resilience, um, it affects, and all of these intelligences affect each other. And that's what's kind of exciting is you can actually, if you shift one, you shift your mindset, you might have a change in your body. If you change your body, you can get a change in your mindset or in how you feel.
I remember reading something, and I'm gonna chop this up, so correct what I'm saying, but you
Mhm.
said something about we talk a lot about mindfulness, as you just were talking about, but this book is really about bodyfulness, and, you said something of that nature, and when we let go of the mind, then we can really lean into that clarity.
Yes, it's such a good call out because um, some it's like when you're stuck and stuck on a problem. I think of it like rock paper scissors, and it's like two rocks. You're using your mind against your mind, and you're trying to solve, and you're like circling around and around and around. And having a more full mind is actually counterproductive in this rock paper scissors dance. So if I'm
Yeah.
going to use the body, I'm like using paper to help work with my mind. It's using something else, um, so it can be extremely effective. Plus, I think mindfulness is almost overused these days.
Yeah. No, it definitely has seeped into every aspect of life. And like you said, I think anything to the extreme might be too much, but it's good that we are paying attention and that we do have that sense of presence too. So why don't you pick up a place that you would like, whether it's from your book, your work, that you think is a good starting point for us now that we've laid that foundation?
Well, I think one of the things that's interesting, uh, maybe we could start with where the seed was first planted. Sometimes hindsight is 2020, and really this whole idea of and wanting to write an entire book about the body and the body as it pertains to leadership. It initially started back in college when I was doing theater. And I know this of a lot of people who've had and experienced theater training. They just know it's so obvious. Like, of course, you're going to use the body in
Yeah.
whatever you're going to do, because that's how you warm up. That's how you get into character. That's how you. And so, I was in this one elective in the back of the theater with my classmates learning theater warm up techniques, which were really a blend of Feldenkrais and Alexander technique to prime the body to be more loose, more fluid, more flexible, so that eventually someday we might actually get on stage and perform. We never did in this class, but that's fine. We'll save that for another day. And it was really embarrassing because the things we did were like doing a pelvic clock thing, and we had to make like spitting sounds out of our mouth to loosen up the jaw. But then fast forward, I left the theater and I walked over to my business class, which was my next class of the day. And it hit me about halfway through the walk that I was really smooth in my walk. It was like I was just gliding across the quad. And then, when I get to the class, which was a business class, and all my classes, business classes were good, but this one was a little more dry. And it was like after lunch kind of thing. Everybody's, like Ferris Bueller, um, the professors asking a question. It's all blank stares. Um, and after we'd, several weeks of theater warm up where I'd actually gotten good at this loosening up my body in the same exact class, I'm like shooting my hand up. I'm jumping out of my chair to express myself and I'm excited. Basically, I'm fearless. I'm
Yeah.
fearless. I'm expanded. I'm happy. It's easy. And so not only was I in that state, but because I was in that state, then other people somehow woke up. It's like, oh, well, what's going on with her? And so then, we debate and things would happen. And so that was the seed, but I think it's really exciting because this is the bridge to leadership, right? Where so
Yeah.
much in leadership is, well, how do I influence? How do I get people engaged? How do I, spark creativity and innovation? And so all of these things just are that much easier if you've engaged your body or primed your body for that.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that story when you were saying and just the contagious effect in when I was reading it in the book, just the contagious effect of your classmates, and if you think about that from a leader who can show up that way, it will inspire that in the people who they're leading and their peers, even their manager, to everybody kinda wins when you have that opening up and that freedom of mind, body, and soul.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, what I'm curious about, and there's so much that we could go into this book, everything from the archetypes, so we'll want to talk about that, to I love the whole section on leaning back, leaning in, and we could talk a little bit about leaning, how we lean and slowing down. But before we kind of dive into some of the nitty gritty, if we have somebody listening here who is thinking, This is really great, but I kinda like to stay in my head." How do you approach some of those people who you're coaching that prefer to stay in the head? Because there's not necessarily anything wrong with it. At the same time, their leadership, I know, can be so much more expanded when we open up to these other areas of self, and today, specifically talking about body. So how do you work with someone, with kind of that frame of mind?
It's a great question. And I think part of it is even for people who are predominantly, I mean, gosh, I love good data. So it's not, I'm not a researcher but, having the story I think in the book that really nails this is Raj, where in his case, he was preparing for a reorg, very in his head. If anything, was taught, you really don't want to feel. Emotions aren't great. You definitely would never want to cry at work or anything like that, or anything in the emotional domain was not something to be celebrated or even worth exploring.
Sure.
But in situations at work where emotional, like being having empathy or showing emotion is important in order to, in Raj's case in the book, there it was a reorg, and he's talking about this reorg. I've thought it all through. Here's the scenarios he's walking me through how he's going to tell the team, and I'm sitting there shocked, like, wow, okay, there's no emotion in here. People are going to probably be devastated, shocked, upset.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so the part for someone who's happily cognitively centered, the beauty of using somatic intelligence is it can be the bridge to emotional. and to increasing your empathy. In the case for Raj, again, this is the story in the book, um, he was able to use this feeling of being punched in the gut to help him access, oh, sadness, fear, pain. So, you know, I would say somatic intelligence is not going to solve everything. It's a new perspective to bring in. And it's certainly one to use if you're stuck and you need help in perhaps increasing your emotional intelligence and your empathy.
Yeah. Let's actually dive into that story. It was a great story, and I've already used it with somebody who was
Oh,
going to be sharing challenging news to a team. And it was the same kind of thing. And I said, how do you bring in feeling? How do you invite others to share kind of what they're experiencing and feeling on a visceral level as well as emotionally. And so I think this example will be really beneficial. So, even how the question that you asked to get Raj to realize it feels like a gut punch, and you also threw out some ideas. So, can you walk us through the story in the book since our listeners and viewers have likely not read the book yet, even though I know they will?
this is true. And this is the hard part when you've written a book. It's like, oh, right. They don't know this yet. Um, and so part of me is like, yeah, where is that story? Okay. So basically it Raj was responsible for a large part of the organization. They were going through a reorg, which meant that his team was going to be shuffled. The project that they'd been working on, basically everything for naught. So you can imagine if you've been working on something for months, even a year, how upsetting it would be that
Yeah.
that basically you're told that it's not going to be used. And not only that, but your peers and you are going to be um, shaken up and moved around, or some may even lose their jobs. So Raj was telling me this, and I said, okay, so what are you going to tell the team? He had this conversation planned for, I think, later in that week. And as he described the story, he said, okay, he basically was going to tell them everything that he had calculated. This is going to happen. And when this happens, you should do this. These are the things to consider. Here's the timeline. So he had basically done the heavy load of the cognitive processing once you receive this, what to do and how to think about it. And it sounded cold, dry, and totally devoid of emotions. And so I said, Raj, can you imagine? Stop there. Can you imagine how it would feel if you're a member of the team and you just
Yeah.
received this news? And so Raj said, okay. And I said, well, how would you feel? And again, as a heavy cognitive, they're like, I have no idea. And so in some cases in coaching, we might use like a coaching feeling wheel or things to help people in the beginning when you're learning about emotions, like, oh gosh, I don't know what I feel. And so helping to lead Raj, because in Raj's case, again, growing up in his family, no one was particularly emotional. So he didn't learn it as a child how to feel his feelings and or how to express them. And so I said, okay, well, now, how did you feel, Raj, when you first heard the news? And I now I'm trying to remember exactly the story I wrote in the book. But basically, he said he didn't know. And I said, okay, maybe shocked, a little bit scared.
Mhm.
And so by leading him, he's nodding. Um, and I, in the coaching conversation, helped him go to a place where he could feel his own pain just
Yeah.
for a little bit. We didn't
Yep.
have to hang out there too long, right? Sometimes it can feel overwhelming.
Well, what I really particularly liked about that story was as a leader, I think you often feel like you have to show up with a mask and you have to show up
Mm.
and share the party line, share the organizational line, and you need to do it in a professional way. And sometimes a professional way we can internalize to mean without emotion and to just communicate the facts, stick to the facts. And when that happens, it leaves the other people who you're communicating to, it leaves them out of the process. It basically shuts down their ability to have emotions or shuts down their ability to have even a dialogue around it. And I think sometimes that's what we hope for because it's like, let's just get this over with. Let me let them know this isn't moving forward and buck up, team, and let's move it on. And that's fine until it's not. And so eventually feelings bubble up, whether it is disengagement, whether it's resentment, whether it's anger, that does bubble up. Even if you got through your meeting being very factual, that doesn't mean that because feelings didn't come out in the meetings, it doesn't mean that those feelings don't exist or that they're not happening
Right.
inside conversations or someone starts looking for another job where they feel more supported. And so even just opening it up as Raj did in this meeting, he allowed the people to have real feelings and say, I know this sucks. This isn't what we wanted. To me, it felt like a gut punch. What's it feeling like to you? And then we now feel like we're a team. So now, how do we as a team want to move forward? And that's what I really liked about that story.
Yeah, and it also you don't have to get overly emotional. Sometimes it's as simple as inviting them. I felt
Yes.
this. It hurt. You may feel a combination of shock, upset, grief, anger, so just inviting that space. And it may take you some time to figure out or process that. And that's
Yeah.
totally to be expected.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we do need to go into the archetypes because you spend a chunk of time talking about that and then also talking about the pace, pliability, and posture are the three that kind of fit within there. So where do you want to dive into this space?
Well, maybe for so it's interesting. The audience for this book is certainly executives. It's also for coaches because many coaches know and have experienced somatic work, but don't always know how to apply it. And it really can be for anyone. I've heard from early readers that were shocked because like I'm not really the audience for this. I'm not even in corporate, but this makes sense. And I'm so anyway. I'm just putting that out there. Also, the part that is I think interesting here is this is a beginning. This is not the be all end all of somatic intelligence. If you get these three things, now you know everything. Oh, this is really just a way of thinking about the body, perhaps for the
Yeah.
first time. So, an advanced somatic coach might think this is too simple for someone who's never thought about the body. It's like, whoa, okay, this is a lot.
Yeah.
So, um, so I'm prefacing it with that, and what happened just in terms of how this came together is looking at patterns across personalities or archetypes. And we know these different ones. They can be, and in the book, I've identified six. There can be more, but in these particular six archetypes, I would see these lumps of patterns happening.
Hmm.
And so this pattern related to pace and going too fast. And then hustle culture, and I appreciated actually you and Claude talked about that. Um, it
Yeah.
is can be super costly. It doesn't invite participation, engagement. You can run right over people if you're obsessively racing.
Yeah.
So pace, and that applies to archetypes, and then posture, which can apply to other archetypes, and then um, had to go with alliteration. So pliability is really another word for flexibility or openness. So being more like Gumby, to
Yeah.
be pliable rather than rigid. So that's just sort of an overview. Yeah.
Yeah. And how do you use the archetypes and these kind of themes in your coaching?
Well, it's helpful for people to, and usually from a 360, so a feedback, or people have often taken different, there are all kinds of assessments to understand what your strengths and weaknesses are. Or if you've done none of those things and you just are reading the book and you're like, yeah, I really relate to this achiever, or I really relate to being a helper, or at least in this phase of my life. Maybe
Sure.
earlier I was something else. So, um, in coaching, it's a matter of figuring out where are your strengths. Like being a helper can be someone who's really caring, who pitches in, dives in, does the work, great collaborator. But where does that stop working? Like, where is a
Yeah.
helper maybe struggling with lack of visibility, with their voice not being heard or in the room and not getting promoted because of these things? So we usually in coaching start with, okay, well, what are the problems or issues you're facing? And then if you hang out and look at through the lens of these archetypes or these patterns, you have more tools at your disposal to work with yourself.
And do you tend to identify the archetype type for your leader, or do you share the archetypes and have them where do you see yourself in this?
Well, now this is what's fascinating because part of the why of the book is this is new. And so I've had clients that I worked with for years. They're like, wait a minute, I didn't even know you did this work. So part of the purpose of the book is to bring this to the forefront because often it would be happening in the background and I
Sure.
would be coaching someone and bringing some of these concepts, but it wasn't in this mapping sort of way. So
Right.
the short answer is time will tell in terms of them seeing the inside of my brain now in a book.
I definitely get that. I have a model that I use, and my clients don't know the exact model. In my head, though, these are some things that I'm thinking, and and that's when we write a book, we put it out there more formally. So I absolutely get that. Why don't you go ahead and share the archetypes with people and kind of just a synopsis of each one so our readers just have a sense of what they might find in the book. What are the archetypes that you've identified and how they might see themselves in them they can just contemplate, because I know at the end you also have some kind of exercise or reflections for people. So if our listeners, our viewers identify with some of these archetypes, it might inspire them to take a deeper look at the book so that they can start to think, how do I want to work with this? And what we know with all of these things, there are strengths, but anything to the extreme can become a hurt or a pain point. And so, how do I navigate within this archetype that I find myself?
Okay. Well, the 6 artists, that's great, and I hope I cover all the things here, so interrupt me if I go astray. But the, first one is the achiever. Let's see, I'm wondering if I should name them all. So, there's the achiever, controller, perfectionist, robot, helper, and hard worker. These are the 6. And in the book, I will name either a famous real person or fictional person that exemplifies each of these archetypes. But usually in the so hopefully in the names themselves, you might say, "Ooh, okay, oh yeah, I'm a perfectionist. Oh yeah, I'm a helper." So sometimes maybe name alone, but an achiever um, is loves to perform, loves the gold stars, loves gets so much done, super successful. That's great. Perhaps moving towards burnout, moving towards things breaking because they've always been an achiever and working so hard. And the controller is someone who is usually decisive, commanding, often at the top of an organization. Many controllers they take charge when things are like they're the first one to say, "Okay, we're going to do this, and this is how we're going to do it." And they're somewhat unapologetic, can be super direct. Sometimes the blind side of this is they can be intimidating. They can be a little too direct, a little too quick to move to action. The perfectionist is the one who loves to get everything right and do it just so, and it really doesn't like mistakes, has a low tolerance for error, can be critical, can be a little too rigid on having things right. The robot. So now the robot is someone who has had to work hard and plow through, and it could be almost their whole career or for certain segments, but they've basically numbed themselves to be able to do the work they have to do.
Mm,
And so I've seen this with leaders who are first generation immigrants who've had to just boom, get it done, do a lot of
yeah.
really, really hard things. I've seen this with those dealing with major illness, family concerns, so on and so. Be the robot. Don't feel, just do.
Mm,
Um, and so they're numb. Numbing is the
yeah,
challenge for
absolutely.
robots, a lack of sensation. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
shall I keep going? There's two
Yeah,
more.
yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Then there's the helper, which again, usually highly invested, really cares about the vision, the mission, the people, is usually looking out, wanting to save people. The helper can, in many cases, because they're looking out for other people, lose sense of what they need and what they want, and can sometimes, as I alluded to earlier, not have the visibility that they need. Uh, to advance their own agenda, goals, etc. And lastly, the hard worker, which in many cases, especially with the people I work with, I'm guessing you too, Eileen, everybody's a hard worker. Like who?
Yeah,
Nobody's just sitting
yeah.
back on the couch, like eating potato chips all day.
No,
I mean, that would
definitely
be
not.
fun and lovely. No. So everyone's a hard worker, but I think of the hard worker archetype as sort of the advanced. This is the whatever 2.0, 3.0, 5.0 version of ourselves
Yeah.
where the hard worker is working on refining. So it's more
Mm,
about, it's not about not working hard, but it's aligning how you're working.
sure. Yep, yep, yep.
Um, just pausing there. Do you want me to keep going on the three? So,
Well, you have brought up pace, pliability, and posture already. So maybe just for
yep.
the sake of time, just to use one example, because we're kind of rounding out for one thing I notice, and I know you had asked me before, I'm curious what you're going to see yourself as. And I would find myself a hybrid or a blend of several of these.
Oh,
I could see
good.
pieces. Sometimes I see myself situationally certain ways and other ways not at all. And
Oh,
but one thing that I did see myself in there's a section in the book where you talk about the posture, because if we bring the posture into these archetypes, or archetypes for the helper, that one person who you were talking about who was constantly leaning in, and I find myself doing that regularly, and part of it's being an executive coach, and it's part of my personality too, but it's like I want to make sure that people feel heard, people feel understood and listened to. And what you talk about in the book is not that that's bad leaning in. However, you worked with a leader where you said you might want to lean back sometimes so that it gives other people an opportunity to own their solutions, to own what they're going through and not feel like, as the helper, you're coming in to be the savior all the time. And it was a really interesting, because at first I thought, I don't know that I agree with that. I like leaning in. I want people to know that I'm present and with them. But the more I digested it, I realized, I need to lean back more. So it was interesting. So I'm curious, any additional thoughts on that?
well, and I also, to go a little deeper on it, as you describe this, I'm thinking of, are you familiar with the drama triangle?
Yeah.
So in the drama triangle, someone's the hero, someone's a victim, and someone's a villain. And all of these are, as long as you're playing one of these roles, you're basically in drama
Mhm.
and part of creating drama. And I really struggled to identify with this model because I'm like, well, wait, what's so bad about being the hero? Who wouldn't want to be the hero? Come in, save the day, do, 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 do. But actually, so this is the aspect of the helper that's important is if you're being a hero, you then have the mindset that someone has to be saved. And
Mhm.
in doing that, you're robbing them. You're
Yeah.
actually disempowering through your very stance and attitude.
Yeah.
And so that was a big unlock for me to say, oh, wow, okay, actually, I don't want to be the hero. Oh.
Yeah.
And so for me, that's how shifting to that posture, almost like, okay, let go, let them have the space. They got this.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
um,
empowering too for that person to, yeah, lean back.
yeah. And I think that takes a lot of practice and coming back to, at least for me anyway.
No, absolutely, and
So
I love a book that makes me challenge my thought process, right, and rethink things, and then it also challenged me physically. It's like, "Hmm, hold tight. What's your posture saying?"
yeah. Okay. So I'm excited by this. It sounds like the helper was sort of the way in or something that seemed both relevant and challenging to you right now. Is that
I
what
would
you're
say
saying?
that
Or
I would say sometimes controller, that piece comes in. Sometimes I'd say I have a hint of achiever sometimes, a hint of controller, and then
a little
a
sprinkling
strong
of this
helper.
and
So
that?
and then I don't see myself as a perfectionist, but then it's like sometimes I definitely, and I might have people listening going, Eileen, I look in the mirror. You never know. So I would say, other than the robot where I don't tend to get numb or check out, and even the hard worker, while I feel like I work hard, the way you described it doesn't feel as connected. So I would say the other four I could see pieces of for sure.
What I like about this, Eileen, is then it's sort of an opportunity to say, okay, less about I am this and what is being overexpressed right now
Yeah,
and where's
yeah.
something that I could pay attention to, right?
Absolutely. And that's what I like. I'm not one who's great at fitting in a box ever. Even our team, the podcast team, teases me because I'm like, I can't read a script to save my life. I can't, have a set questions or interviews. You and I talked about this for a podcast interview because I don't like to be into a box. However, I can
Yeah.
see these different pieces because it allows some freedom. And that's what I think for our listeners and our viewers is this book will help you kind of consider different aspects of yourself. And you might strongly identify with one archetype, or at different times, one might be more higher power at certain times, and other ones might be less. Or like me, you might see different pieces. But just that awareness, I think, was really helpful for me to see. And then again, how my how I show up physically that coordinates with that. So, yeah,
Hmm.
I encourage
Hmm.
people to take a look. So, as we wrap up, what would you hope the big takeaway is for our audience here?
I love a good metaphor. And in this case, it's almost like plastic. If we think of ourselves, our bodies like plastic, if you take plastic is malleable. If you put it in the microwave and you apply a lot of heat, you know how things might all of a sudden melt. Um, the book is not telling us to do that. But if you think of ourselves as being malleable and
Yeah.
using the body and the body's malleability to shift our mind and our mind's malleability. So um,
Mm.
change can be hard. And so I think the whole opportunity here is to use the body to facilitate and support the change that you're trying to make, whatever that may be.
Yeah, I like that. And I'm going to just double tap one thing on that really came through the book too is use the body to connect with people. Think about how your body is either allowing you to connect with people, connect with your teams, or whether it's creating more of a distance too.
That's a great call out. Who
And
knew the body could be that significant?
exactly, exactly. This thing that carts us around. All right. One mindset shift that you hope our people take away.
I don't know if it's both mindset and emotional. Maybe is fear lives in the body, and so a lot of where we get stuck or we may not take action is out of fear. And so to be able to be more expanded in any of our mindsets, working with the body allows you again, if you think of that theater warm up story,
Mhm.
getting fluid and flexible helps to decrease the fear to then overcome, or the courage to speak up, stand up, do the thing.
Yeah. It's a huge tool in your toolbox.
Yes. So the mindset shift is being open to using the body, right? To continue. Like basically, it's an ally. It's an ally rather than something we need to shut up and say, oh, wait, that headache. Oh, stop it.
Yeah.
It's like, no,
Yeah.
information.
Listen, listen, listen. Yes. And we
Mm.
always do one teeny tiny easy action that someone can do immediately. Let's make this be a somatic action, something that somebody can do with their body right away.
Um, I would say in this moment, notice your posture. How are you sitting? Are you, and usually when I say I read postures, everybody straightens up.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
so
Shoulders back.
consider, right? Straighten up, but also relaxing. So it's almost like a
Yeah.
natural lift for a little more alignment. That's one
Yeah.
thing for right now.
Yeah. So take note of your posture in this exact moment. Rebecca Arora, it has been a pleasure. And once again, pardon all my stickies, but for our viewers, you can now see Somatic Intelligence by Rebecca Arora. So if this conversation has intrigued you, I encourage you to dive deeper into Rebecca's book. Thank you again for joining us on What's Possible.